Everyone, we're back for another quick conversation for the long haul of leadership with Tod Bolsinger, and we're going to look at a quote from Mandy Smith today. This is episode 244, Finding Strength in Desperation. And here's what Mandy said. She said, "Every week, I have to stand up there and press against this darkness that wants us to be quiet and wants to come against us and disrupt our sleep and disrupt our sense of well-being and tell us that nothing we do makes any difference." I'll read it one more time. "Every week I have to stand up there and press against this darkness that wants us to be quiet and wants to come against us and disrupt our sleep and disrupt our sense of well-being and tell us that nothing we do makes any difference." So Tod, let me just kind of start by asking you, have you ever experienced this kind of feeling in your ministry?
Oh, man, a lot. And I would have to admit that one of the biggest differences between Mandy and me is she's so much more honest about acknowledging it than I tend to be.
Yeah.
I was trained that you fake it until you make it, right? And that you give up and that you just kind of put away the sense of imposter syndrome we feel, the insecurity we feel, the accusation we feel. I happen to believe that Satan accuses us. And I can remember times when I'd finish speaking and then literally I would feel so depressed afterwards. And I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't understand that it was a combination of adrenaline leaving my body and insecurities facing me and my paying attention to the one person who I could tell didn't like my sermon. And I can remember being a young minister and going back to a hotel room and literally thinking to myself, oh, this is why people would get addicted to pornography.
Oh,
like just to not feel how bad this feels right now. And so partly what I've had to realize is first of all, you acknowledge that I'm not standing here because I'm better than anybody else. I'm standing here only because I've been invited by the Spirit in this group of people to say something that is honoring and points to Jesus. I'm just a docent. I'm just a pointing. I'm pointing to the reality of Jesus. And that even as a leader, my job is not to make it about me. And the less I make it about me and the more that I make it about what we are called to be, then even if I'm feeling discouraged, it's not about me. It's about what the more I can just acknowledge that, the less power it has. And now at this stage of my life, I don't feel that as much. I don't have those experiences very often. It happens on occasion. And what I'm just learned to do is just say the truth, right? Just say what it is I'm feeling and where I am. And for me, a lot of times this doesn't happen in ministry settings as much as it happens sometimes in personal settings. So it's important to acknowledge that we all have these voices that seem to just condemn us. And sometimes they shout a lot louder than the voice of Jesus that says, you are my beloved in whom I'm well pleased.
One of the things that came to mind as you were talking just now is Richard Rohr's concept of first half of life and second half of life. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And then you're talking about when you're younger, now that you're older, you kind of, those voices aren't as loud. When you're younger, I think they're very loud. You got to prove yourself. You got to show everyone how great you are. You got to grow this church. You got to demonstrate that you're worth the money. And then hopefully, and Richard Rohr says a lot of times it comes through some kind of a difficult experience. You get to the other side of that, and if you can get there in a healthy way, then you hold those things a lot more lightly than you used to, right? And so, anyway, as you were sharing and describing all that, I was like, right. As Mandy says, that pressure, the darkness that wants us to be quiet, that wants us to disrupt our sleep, disrupt our sense of well-being, right? The more lightly we can hold the things that tell us we got to be impressive, I think the better we can sleep. The less of the stress that we feel. Any thoughts on that, perhaps?
Well, I love the fact that she mentioned sleep, because one of the parts that a few years ago in my own spiritual direction I got in touch with was I needed to go to bed every night thinking more Jewish than Christian. For our friends who are Jewish, the night starts the next day. The next day starts at sundown. So I always think the very first thing I'm going to do in this new day is go to sleep. and trust the God of the universe is going to take care of everything.
Yeah.
And that while I'm sleeping, that's my act of faith. God, you're in charge of this world and I'm not. And when I wake up in the morning, feel free to tell me what you'd like me to do, like, because you're already at work. And what it's done for me is it really means that when I go to bed at night, my act of faith is to try to let go of things and sleep, trusting that the Lord gives rest to his beloved. And literally, I wake up in the morning, my opening prayer is, in gratitude, the Lord gives sleep to his beloved. Because a lot of times when I have restless nights, it's because I'm anxious and worried.
Right.
And usually it's some kind of voice of condemnation that I'm not doing enough or whatnot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Something we, those voices will always be there, but then finding ways like you just described, to silence those voices, to still those voices, to let go of those voices. And anyway, I love that. I don't want to call it a strategy, but it's kind of a strategy that you have, right? To say, okay, Lord, it's a way of opening yourself up to the Spirit, right? To say, this is yours and it's not mine, and I don't have to carry this. You can.
It's actually one of my spiritual practices.
I love it.
To go to bed at night saying, God, you are in charge of this world. I am not. I'm going to rest. That's my act of faith.
Yeah.
When I wake up in the morning, then you tell me where you'd like me to serve.
I love it. I love it. Here's the quote from Mandy one more time. She said, every week I have to stand up there and press against this darkness that wants us to be quiet and wants to come against us and disrupt our sleep and disrupt our sense of well-being and tell us that nothing we do makes any difference.